Hi guys, welcome to my channel and welcome to my birth story video. If you've been here a while, you would know that I was hoping for a VBAC, and as you can see from the title of the video, it was very much unsuccessful. On the other hand, if you are new here, hi, I'm Chrissy. I am a mom of two very recently. I just had my second baby a month ago. He's here behind me, fast asleep. And yeah, today I'm going to kind of walk you through everything that went on. It was a wild ride. It is a long story to tell, so grab a snack, get comfortable and enjoy. So yeah, my hope for this birth was for it to be a redeeming and positive, unmedicated vaginal birth experience. Life had other plans. It ended up being not only medicated, but also turned into an emergency C-section. Before I go into the actual story of how everything happened, I just want to give a bit of background on why having a VBAC was so important to me. If you have watched my previous birth experience, my first birth story, and also my video about my C-section recovery 3 years on, I will link them below. I'll post them up here so you can see as well. If you've watched those, you would know that my first C-section, even though it was planned because my son was breech, it was a very, very negative birth experience, and the recovery was brutal. The experience was just in itself not at all what I ever hoped or wanted for a birth. And so one of the reasons that I wanted a VBAC so much was to kind of make up for that, and also to have a better experience this time round. I didn't want to go through the same trauma. I had no idea what was coming for me. I didn't want to go through the same trauma. I didn't want to go through the recovery again, especially knowing that not only would I have a newborn this time, but I would also have a 4-year-old to take care of. Just so many things. There's like, I'll try to keep it relatively concise, but there's a lot to go into. So yeah, not wanting to experience the C-section and recovery again was one of the main reasons. Another reason was that I felt that the first time round, because it was a planned C-section, I never went into labor, I never experienced any of the hormonal shifts that a mother who gives birth vaginally would experience. And I always felt like the spontaneity and even the hormones and everything, I felt like it was stolen from me. I felt like the opportunity was just taken away. And the first time round, it was very much a surgery. I was going in for a surgery. I wasn't going in for a birth. I wasn't going in to meet my son. Like, obviously I was, but it became very much, it was very surgery focused. And I felt like the whole idea of labor and birth was taken away, and so that was something that I really wanted to experience this time. I wanted to experience labor, I wanted to experience contractions, I wanted to experience a vaginal birth and, you know, everything that comes with it, good or bad. And aside from this, the third reason, which kind of goes very much together with this, is that all my life I've dreamt about this. I'm one of those psychos who would just spend hours and hours and hours watching birthing videos, teen years and well into my 20s, all through my 20s actually, up until I was 27 when I had my first son. Yes, I had to count. Yeah, all the way up until I had my first C-section, birthing videos were my favorite thing to watch, and I spent my life daydreaming and romanticizing the idea of having a vaginal birth, and I didn't get to experience that, and I wanted to experience it at least once in my life. The final reason that I wanted a VBAC so much was because I know that having a C-section already increases your chance of needing a C-section the second time round. Having 2 C-sections makes it extremely unlikely that I will ever be able to give birth vaginally in the future. So if we do decide to have a third child, I know that, especially now, and you'll understand why once I explain it, there is no chance of my ever having a vaginal birth. And I'll probably end up crying at some point in this video. I'm trying to distance myself from the emotions, but it is what it is. I know that I will never get to experience a vaginal birth, and it breaks me. And many women would think that I'm crazy or that it's not a big deal, but this is a very personal experience, and this is something that, you know, like I said, I've always dreamt of, and knowing that I would never get to it, that I would never be able to experience a vaginal birth, It hurts. It really hurts. So that's on the VBAC. And so anyway, because having a VBAC was very important to me, I'll just take you back a little bit. Before we actually started trying for a baby this time round, I obviously, like, we live in Slovakia. It's hard enough to find doctors who speak English here. So finding a gynecologist who not only speaks English but also supports a VBAC was something that felt very daunting to me. But thankfully, someone recommended my doctor, the person who ended up being my doctor, who is brilliant. I was very nervous to go to a male gynecologist because I've only ever had female gynecologists before, but honestly this man was a godsend. And the only reason that I think my experience giving birth to Elliot, my newborn, wasn't as traumatic as it probably should have been given what happened is because he's such a brilliant doctor and he's so supportive. So yes, he was recommended to me. I went to him. The first appointment I ever had with him, I had a long list of questions and I asked so much about how he supports VBACs and what the game plan would be and all of this and that. So anyway, so I had a doctor, like I had one thing in the bag. Throughout the pregnancy, everything was fine, everything was great. We were on track, baby was not breech at any point, so that was great. I was always like head down, head down, head down, because to me that was the main thing. But yes, it was a healthy pregnancy, aside from the fact that it was a very difficult pregnancy. Like, I was just miserable for most of it. The baby was healthy and I was healthy in technical terms. So that was great. And all the way up until the end, everything was fine. From 35 weeks, I started having my weekly checks and cervical exams, which I hate, but anyway. And my cervix was closed shut. Obviously, this is a cervix that has never actually experienced labor before. And so in my body's experience, in my cervix, this was my first ever birth, even though I have another baby. Because I never experienced labor or birth or a vaginal birth, my body had no idea what to do. So this was essentially considered a first birth. Yeah, so my cervix was shut, every appointment, cervix shut, cervix shut, cervix completely shut. I did everything that there is in every list, on every article, on like just everything. I was eating dates, I was drinking raspberry leaf tea, I was going for long walks, I was doing the curbside walking, I was taking evening primrose, I was even doing the perineal massage, not that that induces, but anyway, I was doing everything, even the thing that makes the baby in the first place. We were doing our homework, okay? I was just trying so hard. I exercised all throughout the pregnancy from the very beginning, obviously, except like those really bad nauseous, like vomiting weeks. I was exercising, I kept active, I was using the birthing ball and doing all the exercises and hip rotations, everything. I was doing everything. I was doing everything right. And I did everything I could. And also, this is another thing, I was in a bit of a rush to get labor going. We had a short time frame for when I really ideally needed to go into labor. So I'll explain a little bit about this as well. There's so much to say. So we live abroad, right? We don't have any family here, and we do have friends here, but a lot of them either have young children or are pregnant as well. And we had no one to stay with Ben, our 4-year-old, while we were in hospital. So that was like a really stressful situation. That was something that actually added a lot of stress all throughout the pregnancy, because the whole time I was like, who are we going to leave him with? Who are we going to trust to keep him with? We did have some backup options, but the best case scenario, which thankfully happened, was my darling sister-in-law. Here's a shout out to Melissa. She actually left everything. She traveled up to Slovakia to come and live with us for 2 weeks. It was actually a one-way ticket. She came when I was 39 weeks pregnant. We were like, okay, this should be like a good enough window. We basically said, okay, we'll wait until the baby is born and then we'll figure out when she'll go home. But we knew that she needed to be home by the 9th, which meant that she'd need to travel on the 8th of May, which was 2 weeks later. So we did have essentially like a 2-week window where we really needed things to happen. Also, having spoken to my doctor to see like how far we'd go to wait for things to happen spontaneously until we'd be considering induction and all of that, we wanted to avoid induction because it would increase the chance of needing a C-section. So we had discussed getting up to 41 weeks. So 39 weeks came and went. 40 weeks came and almost went. And when I was 40 weeks and 5 days, I want to say, 40 weeks and 4 days, I went into labor. So now we're going to get into the official birth story. Also, adding on to the stress, my doctor was abroad so this was, we're talking May, okay? So my due date was 30th April. My doctor was abroad from the 2nd till the 4th of May. I really wanted him to be present because he's been so supportive, and I just really wanted him to be there, and thank God things worked out the way they did in a way. And so anyway, he came back on the 4th. On the 4th, in the evening, my contractions started getting really, really strong. I had like some on and off in the weeks prior, lots of Braxton Hicks, but on Sunday the 4th, I started feeling them coming on quite strongly. So I had a shower, went to bed. Something told me to put like a waterproof pad on the bed, and thank God I did, because at 1:30, I think it was 1:45, yes, at 1:45 in the morning, I had slept at about midnight, so at 1:45 my water broke. I woke up and I just felt like a stream of water coming out of me, and I was like, I'm not peeing myself, surely, like what's going on? And I waited a second, and then I felt another stream of water come out of me, and I just kind of felt myself, and I'm like drenched, and I tapped Chris, and I was like, Chris, my water broke, and he woke up and he was like, what the heck? And so then I was like, my water broke, it's happening. And I'm telling you, I was so excited, I was so happy. I was like, we're doing it. I went into labor. This is happening. Like, I've never experienced this before, and this is exactly what I wanted. I wanted spontaneous labor, and it was happening. So I got up, I put on one of those like adult diapers, and I was quite sure that I would need to go to hospital straight away, but I wasn't like 100%. So I called the hospital. The nurse didn't speak any English, but at least I spoke enough Slovak to get by. And I basically told her, like, my water broke, do I need to come in now, or should I stay home and rest? And she was like, no, you come right now. I was like, okay. And so, so I had my adult diaper on, and we got packing everything, like all the last minute things like charger and phones and stuff like that. And we woke up Mel, my sister-in-law, and we just started like basically getting ready to leave. Obviously, at some point I went to the toilet, and I realized from the diaper that I was wearing that the water was green. So obviously Google search, and that can indicate meconium being present in the water, which is not a good sign. So that was the first red flag that happened in this whole shitstorm of a birth, because that's what I've been calling it. Another thing I forgot to mention, the contractions that I said had started in the evening had stopped by this point, and they started again very intensely about an hour after my water broke. So at about 2:30, I think, was the first one. That's when the contractions started again, and they were coming really strong. They were so painful, could hardly breathe, I couldn't talk, like they were like full on really strong contractions. And I was happy about it, because I was like, I'm actually doing this, I'm experiencing this, I'm experiencing labor, I'm going to have the vaginal birth of my dreams. Had no idea what was coming. And so yeah, so by about 3 o'clock we left home. I gave Ben a very tearful and long goodbye. He was completely fast asleep. He had no idea, but I just cried over him, and then we left. And it took us ages to get into the hospital, because we went in from the wrong side. We didn't know it was the wrong side. We're trying to speak to the guy at the gate, and he's just not letting us in, not speaking any English. I was like contracting and screaming in the bit of Slovak, like, please help us, I'm giving birth, and he's just doing nothing. And then eventually we like checked on the maps, and we're like, oh, it seems that there is another entrance. So we went round, we got in. Oh, as well as ends well. 4 o'clock in the morning, I made it into the hospital. I had to go in by myself until they checked me, and they strapped me to the monitor. He'll be joining for the rest. And so they strapped me to the monitor, they checked my cervix, and I was 1 centimeter dilated. I was like, okay, things are moving, things are happening, because up until this point my cervix was completely shut. So they kept me on the monitor for a while. I was having contractions every 5 to 7 minutes. I believe. Let me just check. Yeah, so at 4 o'clock I was 1 centimeter dilated, and the contractions were coming between 5 and 8 minutes apart and lasting about a minute to a minute and a half. They admitted me into the hospital and I was in a room alone, but Chris wasn't allowed to come with me at this point, so they sent him home. I basically told him to go and get some rest while he could. I tried to rest, but I couldn't because the contractions were coming way too strongly and very, very frequently. Hello. And so this went on for a couple of hours. Contractions were very intense. I did some like hip rotations, and I was trying to just walk around, do some breathing and use the combs for some pain relief. I just wanted to try and do everything as naturally as possible. I was exhausted. I was on an hour and a half of sleep, and then at about 6 o'clock my doctor arrived at the hospital. I was so happy that he made it. He was there, and he told me that basically they're going to be checking my cervix again because there was the meconium. It was a bit of a red flag, so they needed to be monitoring me quite frequently. I had written in my birth preferences that I didn't want to be monitored all the time, and I wanted freedom of movement as much as possible. He told me, you will have the freedom of movement to an extent, but we do need to monitor you. I believe it's like every 3 hours. I don't know, I could be wrong, but anyway, every 3 hours was a cervical check for sure. And so yeah, so then at 7 o'clock I had another cervical check, and at this point, I'm just checking my labor notes here. At this point I was 2 centimeters dilated, and contractions were coming between 3 and 7 minutes apart, which is quite a range. They were lasting a minute to a minute and a half still, and they were very, very, very intense contractions. I have a high pain tolerance. I did not expect to be in so much pain. Obviously I was very naive because I've never experienced it, but it was really, really bad, and I didn't know genuinely how I was going to pull it off. At 7 o'clock they moved me to another room, and this was a room with only 1 bed, so they said that my husband could come. Technically, until I was 5 centimeters dilated, he shouldn't have been able to come, but because they got me a room alone, and because my doctor was really vouching for me and like trying to do everything to make this experience as easy as possible for me, he pushed them so that they gave me this room alone, and so that my husband could join. So Chris came at about 8 o'clock, I think it was. It might have been a bit later. But anyway, at this point, I'm just laboring really hard and nothing was really happening. At about 10:30, they checked me again, and I was 3 centimeters at this point. And we were like, okay, it's good, something's happening, but not enough is happening. Thankfully, baby was fine. They were checking him on the monitor. There was no cause for concern, but obviously, since my water had broken, time was, you know, pressing. So we wanted things to keep moving. At this time, like at 10:30 after they checked me, they gave me this, it's like a weird chair. It's very cool, actually. I really enjoyed it. It's like a laboring chair, which has a hole in it, and they put like heat and essential oils and things like that, and it's supposed to help to open up. So I sat on that for quite a while. I think I was on it for probably about an hour. And yeah, at this point they checked me again. I was still only 3 centimeters. I was beyond shattered, and I really felt like I couldn't go on anymore. And at this point we decided that I would get an epidural. Going back a couple of hours, when it was around 8 o'clock and Chris had come in to the hospital, I told him, I said, something tells me I'm going to end up needing that epidural, because I was exhausted and the pain was so bad, and I hadn't slept. Like, maybe if I had gotten more sleep I would have been able to tolerate the pain, but I just couldn't, and I was shattered. And I felt like, this sounds like a real exaggeration, but this is genuinely what I felt like. I felt like I was going to die if I didn't get some kind of pain relief, because I just couldn't take the pain. So we went for the epidural. I was really distraught about it, but also I knew that it was the only way that I was going to get through the rest of labor, still not having any idea of what was going to go on after that. So this is, at this point, 12:30. I had been in labor for 11 hours. My water had broken 12 hours ago. So we're like at the halfway mark of how long the waters can be broken before the baby needs to be out, because you have like a 24-hour window. And again, because of the meconium, this is just like, it was all very stressful. But anyway, at about 12:45, I had the epidural done. And I was actually really pleasantly surprised that I could still move around. So I thought that the epidural would basically numb me completely and I would just have to be sitting, like laying in bed, unable to move. But I'm not sure if it's like there's different types of epidurals or if they affect women differently or a combination of the two, but I was able to move around. So I was dancing, I went to have a shower, like a long shower. My doctor told me I need to stay at least 45 minutes in the shower, so it was a really long shower. So I had a shower, I was dancing around, I was feeling nothing. I could not feel the contractions, and I'll be honest, I hated that because I felt like I wasn't actually in tune with my body. So I was kind of having fun with the whole thing of like, you know, having a dance party and just jamming out in the hospital room. But I also really hated that I couldn't feel what was happening. And then it turns out that the contractions actually slowed down. And this is where things started getting even more stressful and complicated. At 2 o'clock, I managed to get a little bit of rest. I think I slept for like 20 minutes to half an hour. I wasn't feeling any pain. I'd showered, I'd danced. I figured I might as well get some rest to help me get through the rest of the day and the experience. And then at 20 minutes to 3 o'clock, so it was 2:40, they checked my cervix again, and I was still at 3 centimeters. It seemed at that point that I just wasn't going to get past 3 centimeters at all. I was moving around, doing everything that I could, but the contractions had slowed down and I just wasn't opening up anymore. And so my doctor kind of said, listen, let's give it a few more hours, let's see how things go. But at this point, it's looking like we're probably going to be going towards a C-section because we need the baby out fairly soon. And I wasn't ready to give up quite yet. I was like, I've worked so hard and I've done so much, and I'm not just going to say, okay, let's go for it. So we gave it a couple more hours, and by 5:30, basically contractions had stopped. Nothing was happening. There was nothing going on. And so at this point, 15 hours of labor, I'm not anywhere past 3 centimeters, and nothing was happening. And so I went in, I had, a good chat with my doctor, and he's like, listen, this is going to result in a C-section because we can't leave the baby in for much longer with the meconium and everything. Like, it's just really not looking good. Had there not been the meconium issue, or had my water not broken, I'd have been like, listen, I'm gonna stick it out, I'm gonna wait, I'm gonna do whatever I can to have this baby vaginally. But because there were the risks, he basically always told me, like, and I'm going to support you as much as I can, but there's a certain line that I won't go past it, and we are nearing that line. And so we said, okay, as a final resort, as a final attempt, let's try Pitocin. Let's try and, boost the contractions, really push things and get things going. He told me, he said, it's like a 10% chance that the Pitocin will work, with a 90% chance that we're going to end up in a C-section. I was like, you know what, I'm gonna take my chances. So we went for the Pitocin. The plan was do Pitocin for an hour and see where that gets us. At this point, I'm getting set up with the Pitocin, and this was the moment when Chris was like, I'm gonna go and get some food because I need food. And we'd been thinking like all day, like, okay, you need to eat. I told him he needs to eat. But at no point, because he was like obviously being really supportive and staying with me, and he didn't want to get food into the room because I couldn't eat because of the epidural. And so he got food and he went to pick it up. And this was like 10 minutes into having the Pitocin. So he went down. 5 minutes later, my doctor came. There were like a bunch of doctors and a bunch of midwives, and they were all kind of looking at the monitor and moving it around and saying like, okay, well, let's try this, let's try that. And they weren't speaking in English, so I was like, can I please know what's going on? And I could see their worried faces, and obviously I knew something was up, and I was hearing beeping that was changing at different frequencies, and I was just like, okay, something's not right. At this point, Chris is getting his McDonald's takeaway. I'm laughing now. I was not laughing then, obviously. It turns out that baby went into distress, and my doctor was like, okay, we've reached the line. We're not going any further. We're stopping the Pitocin. We're going to prep you for a C-section. I was like, listen, I've done everything I could. It's okay. We're going to do this, and we're going to get through it. Something I forgot to mention, I'm sorry, I'm really going back and forth, there's so much to say. When I had the initial conversation with him about, you know, trying Pitocin as a final resort, but it's probably going to end up in a C-section, I was like, and I'll talk a bit more about this later, I told him, if I'm going to have a C-section, I'm having a C-section on my grounds. And I want it to be a C-section that I am going to be in control of as much as possible. And so here's what I am demanding. I said this through many tears, not with any smile on my face. Yeah. I was in tears and I was in a complete mess. But basically, my doctor went against hospital policies. He fought for me. Obviously, he got approval from his superior. The policy is that the husband isn't present, the partner isn't present for a C-section. I said, I'm not doing this without Chris. I'm not doing it without Chris. So you're either going to get Chris in, or I'm just going to stay here and wait, and you're not going to operate. And so he said, okay, I will try my best to you know, get approval for that. I said, also, I want to hold the baby as soon as he's born. I said, I want to have that bonding time, because when Ben was born, they literally just said like, oh, here's your baby, and I saw half his face upside down, and they took him away, and I didn't see him for another 2 hours. And I hated that, and that was one thing that really, really stung me about my first experience, and I was like, I'm not doing that again. And again, this is not, this goes against the hospital policy here, but I told him, I said, baby's born, baby comes onto my chest. And he said, if the baby is crying and like okay, then I'm going to, you know, again, try my best to get approval for that. I also asked if I could assist in the birth, because I know that this is done in some places. I was really shooting like in the dark here, but he told me no. He said that's not gonna happen. I was like, it's fine. And so he had gone to check with his boss basically, and he got approval so that Chris could be in the room with me and that I could hold the baby as soon as he's born. Going back to, yeah, baby is in distress, Chris is getting his food. It was such a rush, and this happened like 10 minutes after the shift change. So these are all new midwives. I've never met them before, I've never seen them. They don't speak any English, what all the others did. So I was really annoyed. And they're just all of a sudden putting the catheter in and just putting bandages on my legs, and it was just all of a sudden that like Formula 1 pit stop kind of feeling, but not in any way a good one. And I was like, what are you doing? Please wait for my husband. I'm calling Chris. I'm like, please just come now. Forget about the food. Just get your ass over here. He walked in and there's medical staff full, like all in scrubs, and I'm surrounded by midwives and I'm crying. Yeah. Oh, it's okay. It's okay. And anyway, so all of this is happening and I'm like mentally preparing that we're gonna go for the C-section. Chris is going to be there, I'm going to hold the baby, and everything is going to be somehow okay. Chris was being so supportive. Poor thing was starving, but he was just there and holding my hand. And at that moment, my doctor comes in and he said, Chrissy, I'm really sorry, but we're going to have to put you under general anesthetic. I became hysterical. I just felt like the walls came tumbling down. I felt like everything was just crashing, and I was like, why? Why is this happening? I couldn't understand why everything was just going so wrong. But when I heard those words, I was like, no, I've fought this far to get what I want, which is not in any way what I wanted. But I said, I'm not gonna go down without a fight for this as well. And I said no. I said, you are not putting me under general anesthetic. First of all, Chris wouldn't be present. Secondly, I wouldn't be present and I wouldn't be able to see the baby for God knows how long. And thirdly, and this is probably the most concerning thing, I have some weird thing in my body. Whenever I go under general anesthetic, I wake up with a seizure. My body just completely goes into dystonia, and the last thing you want after a major abdominal surgery is your entire body seizing and, you know, just jerking around, causing much more strain to the muscles. And I just wasn't going to go down with that. I wasn't going to let that happen. And I told my daughter, I was hysterically crying, hysterically. And I don't even know how I found the strength within me at this point to keep fighting, but I knew that that was weird. Like the bit of strength I had left, that's what I was sending it towards. And I said, no, I said, you find another way. You're not putting me under general anesthetic. And then he went out again and he came back in with the anesthesiologist anesthesiologist, I think I'm saying that right, and she spoke English, and she told me, she said, our concern is because of the epidural, we cannot also do the spinal block. And I don't know, like at this point it just felt like mumbling, like I couldn't actually understand what was going on. I was so hysterical and completely distraught. And I just kept fighting. I said, I don't care, because the baby had kind of calmed down at this point. It wasn't an adamant emergency that needed to be done right this second. Like if we needed to wait a little bit longer, it would have been okay. And I was just like, take out the epidural now, we'll wait. I don't care what happens, like we're not doing it under general anesthetic. I said there's no way that is going to happen. Find another way to get the baby out of me, but that's not it. And they went out again, and then my doctor came and he said, we got a second opinion, we're going to try to do the spinal. I was like, thank you. Like, just, honestly, this was such a whirlwind, and I'm laughing and smiling now. I've had a month where I've really been working hard on processing everything, because up until like 2 weeks ago I couldn't say any of these things without completely breaking down and crying. Now I'm in a slightly better place, but honestly this was a really difficult birth experience and a complete shit show, like I said. And so anyway, so we go in. I'm not done, guys, I'm not done. We go in, they did the spinal, they lay me down, strapped my arms and everything. They told me, like, as soon as the baby's born we will take off the straps so that you can hold him. I was like, good. you're doing what I demanded of you. And so yeah, then they lay me down, they put up the curtain, they started cutting me open. Chris came, he's there holding my hand. I'm like, okay, we're getting through it. Like they managed the spinal, you know, everything is going great, which was like, it was anything but great. But anyway, okay, are you hungry? Okay, come. And at this point it's like, I think it was about 6-ish. Yeah, it must have been around 6 o'clock, maybe a bit later. Because Elliot was born at 7:01. So they took him out and he cried straight away and I cried straight away. And they brought him to me and it was so beautiful. And I had told Chris, because this was another thing that we didn't have from when Ben was born. We didn't have a single photo or video from, you know, when we met him. And I told Chris, I was like, don't even ask for permission, because I don't know if we're allowed to. I said, but get out your phone. He's a noisy feeder, sorry. I said, get out your phone and take videos. Like, I just want to have a record of us meeting him. And Chris filmed it and it was so beautiful. I don't even remember very well because I was like delirious with the exhaustion, the anesthetic and everything. But the first thing that I did was I told him, hi baby, happy birthday, it's so nice to meet you. And I just think that's really beautiful. Like, those are the first things I ever said to him. Yeah, that was just the only good thing that happened throughout the entire 24 hours. At some point, so I held him on me for about an hour and we could feel the tension rising with my doctor and the team who were working on me, basically, who were closing me up. And after a while we found out why. So then after an hour of holding him, they were like, listen, we need more space to do what we're doing, so we need to take him. And I was happy enough at that point. Like, I had a whole hour holding him. I know that they needed to run some tests on him anyway, especially because of the meconium and all of that. And to cut a very long story very, very slightly short, not only were there several adhesions in my uterus, but it also ruptured. And Elliot's foot was actually sticking out of my uterus. And the only reason that it didn't get worse was because where the rupture happened, I was lucky enough that it was kind of pressed against my muscles. So there wasn't any like bleed out or any leakage or anything. Like, my muscles literally held the rupture slightly intact, but Elliot's foot was sticking through this hole. Yeah, it was wild. And my doctor actually told me it was the worst C-section he's had in over 3 years, which is great. I was like, hey, see, I'm so memorable. But oh my goodness, as you can see, and I know this has been a very long story, I did warn you, it was a real disaster of a birth from beginning to end. Like, I was so enthusiastic and so happy when I went into labor and my waters broke. I was like, oh, it's happening, I'm doing it. And The whole time, I did feel very defeated, and I'm working through this still. I felt let down by my own body, and I felt a little bit betrayed, and I felt a little bit, you know, like broken and just defeated. And I felt like, why can't I do this? What's wrong with me? What more could I have done? And my doctor reassured me, and he said, there's not like you, he said, you should be so proud of yourself because you have literally done everything that you could. And sometimes shit just happens, and sometimes a woman just can't give birth naturally, and it sucks, and it sucks so much, even more this time around, because I worked so hard. And this is actually a message that I want to give to all other emergency C-section or failed VBAC mums. You could have done everything right. You could have eaten all the dates and drank all the teas and taken all the supplements and done all the exercises and curbside walking and sex and literally everything. You could have done all the right breathing. You could have prayed and manifested and hoped and dreamed. You could have done everything, and you could have done it all right. And sometimes it just doesn't go the way that you want it to. And you're allowed to be angry, and you're allowed to be sad, and you're allowed to mourn the loss of the birth that you wanted, the birth that you hoped for, that you so desperately tried to have. And you can feel resentful towards yourself and towards other mums, and you think, what does she have that I don't, and what did I do wrong? And you can feel all the things. There's a lot to feel, and it's hard. It's really hard. Sometimes it just doesn't go right. Sometimes it feels like everything goes wrong. And there's going to be people who are going to tell you, well, at the end of the day, all that matters is that your baby is healthy. But don't for a second think that how you feel doesn't also matter, okay? And I'm telling this to myself as well. And part of the reason that I'm able to talk about it all is because I have allowed myself to feel all the feelings. And there's been a lot of resentment. There's been a lot of anger. And so much heartbreak around this recovery. But what I will say as well is that, you know, at the beginning of the video I said that I hoped that this would be a redeeming birth, and in so many ways it was. Even though it was a complete disaster from beginning to end, it was a disaster. But I am so proud of myself because I fought so hard from the second that we got to that hospital. I fought so hard to make it a birth that I would be in control of. And even though I had zero control and I had no way of knowing all of the things that were going to go wrong, I fought so much to make it the best that it could be. For Chris to be present when he wasn't supposed to be. Being able to hold my baby as soon as he was born, which I wasn't supposed to do, but I did. To not be put under general anesthetic, and they listened to me and they did it. And that in itself was so empowering, and I'm so proud of myself, and I got through it. Because even then, postpartum, it's very typical here that the baby is kept in the room where the midwives and the pediatric nurses are, and the mums are left alone to rest. And most of the mums are happy about that, but I was like, I'm not resting unless my baby is right here, so you bring my baby to me. And they didn't want to let him sleep with me. And I'm like, I'm not gonna sleep unless you give me my baby, so you bring me my baby back. And they kept taking him, like, stop taking my baby away from me. I want my baby here at all times, unless it's completely necessary that they take him for some kind of testing, in which case I want to be there with him, I want to be present, which I wasn't for all, but I was for most. I was like, you bring my baby right the hell back to me, and don't you dare try to take him away again. And there was this one nurse, I literally had a whole argument with her through Google Translate, please note, where she was saying, no, because you're not in a position that you can take care of the baby by yourself because of a C-section, and if you need anything, like, we're too far away and you can't come alone. And I was like, you leave my baby here. I am perfectly capable. This is not my first time. I was like, this is not my first rodeo. I said, this is my second C-section. If I could do it the first time, I can do it now. I am not letting you take him away, and there's nothing that you can do to convince me that you are in the right to take my baby away from me. And I won. And then when it came to being discharged, they weren't fully happy with my blood test results, but I was like, listen, I feel fine. The results are getting better every day, so give me my medicine, I'll take it at home. You're not keeping me another day away from my other son, and I'm not staying in this hospital one more night. I was miserable by the end of it. Is that funny? This is so funny. Yeah, I was like, it's been 5 days. I am going the heck home today. So I went home on Friday. They wanted to keep me till Saturday. I was like, no. So I signed the AMA papers and I discharged myself basically. I fought so much and I fought so hard, and I was so strong, and I never thought of myself as being a very strong person, and I've always been a pushover and a people pleaser. And if someone tells me, oh no, we have to do this because it's policy, I'd be like, oh, I can't fight with policy. But this time I was like, I'm gonna fight every single policy if it's the last thing I do. And I did. And so, bringing this very long and windy video to a close, I would like to just say, for anyone who is planning a baby or about to have a baby or anything like that, for whatever reason you're watching this, if there is a takeaway, it's number one, that everything can go horribly wrong, but you'll somehow still get through it. Number two, to always fight to make the experience the best that you can with the circumstances that you have, to always advocate for yourself, and you know, just be your own like cheerleader. And also, if things go wrong, it's not your fault, okay? It isn't, and no matter what, it's gonna be okay. That's the final takeaway. It's going to be okay. So yeah, that was my very crazy and intense birth story, the one that brought me this beautiful boy over here. It sounds mad, but would I go through it all again? Yeah. Knowing what comes out of it, you know, knowing that I get to have this beautiful blessing in my arms and someone to love so much, you know, it feels small when you look at the bigger picture. It's not small at all, it's really big, but it does then once you're out of it and you kind of look back and you think, okay, it's okay. Even though I really wish that I wouldn't have to ever go through that again. But anyway. So yes, as a final note, I just want to say just a couple of thank yous. First of all, thank you to Melissa, my sister-in-law, for being our peace of mind. So thank you, Mel. A huge thank you to my wonderful husband, Chris, who was the biggest support system throughout this all, and I could not have done it without him. A huge thank you to my doctor for fighting for me. A very big thank you to baby Elliot for coming into my life. And my very final thank you is to myself. And I'm so damn proud of myself, so I'm very grateful for everything that I did to get through all of this. And so that brings us to the end of this video. If you watched the whole thing, thank you so much for staying. Please subscribe to my channel if you enjoyed this and if you enjoy content about motherhood and all that stuff. And I will see you guys in my next video. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, bye.